The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slipped under the door of Elara's veterinary clinic like it had every right to be there. Cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. Expensive. Pretentious. She held it between her fingers, reading the elegant script that announced Vivian Cross's 25th birthday celebration at the Riverside Club. No mention of Marcus. No warning that her ex-boyfriend would be there. Just an address, a date, and the kind of formal dress code that made her stomach twist. "You're not actually going to that, are you?" Claire leaned against the reception desk, her red curls bouncing as she tilted her head. Her best friend had a talent for reading her expressions, even the ones Elara tried to hide. "I don't know." Elara set the invitation down, turning her attention back to the supply order on her computer screen. "Probably not. Definitely not," Claire corrected. "That woman was never nice to you, even before Marcus became an issue. Why would she invite you now?" "Because she wants to rub something in my face," Elara thought, but didn't say. She could smell the ulterior motive even without her enhanced senses. 8 months had passed since Marcus Denton walked out of her life, telling her she would never be strong enough for someone like him. 8 months since she left everything familiar behind and built this clinic from nothing. She had belonged to the Hollow Creek Pack once, a small community that felt more like family than hierarchy. But after Marcus, after the humiliation of being rejected by someone she thought loved her, she couldn't stay. Being around other shifters meant questions, pity, and constant reminders of her failure. So she left, went independent, opened a clinic that treated all animals, shifter or not, and asked no questions when wounded wolves showed up at her back door in the middle of the night. "Come with me," Elara said suddenly, looking up at Claire. "If I'm going to suffer through this, you're suffering with me." Claire's eyebrows shot up. "You're seriously going?" "I'm curious." It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. Part of her needed to see what Vivian wanted. Part of her needed to prove she could walk into that room and not fall apart. "Fine," Claire sighed dramatically. "But you're buying me dinner afterward. Expensive dinner. With wine." The Riverside Club occupied the top floor of a building downtown. All glass walls and city lights. Elara could feel the difference the moment she stepped inside. The air felt heavier here, saturated with the presence of shifters trying very hard to pretend they were just successful humans having a party. Claire noticed none of it, of course. She simply admired the ice sculptures and the champagne fountain, commenting on how the other half lived. Elara stayed close to her friend, using Claire's human normalcy as an anchor against the undercurrent of territorial tension that made her skin prickle. Then she smelled him. Marcus. That familiar scent of pine and arrogance that used to mean safety and now just meant mistakes. Her body went rigid, every instinct screaming at her to leave before he noticed her. But it was too late. He was already looking at her from across the room, his light brown eyes registering surprise before sliding into something else. Satisfaction, maybe, or calculation. "That's him, isn't it?" Claire whispered. "The ex?" "Yeah." Elara forced herself to breathe normally. Marcus looked exactly the same. Blonde hair perfectly styled with too much gel. Expensive suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He stood next to Vivian, his hand possessive on the small of her back. "We can leave," Claire offered quietly. "No." Elara lifted her chin. "We're staying." The party continued around them, a blur of conversations and laughter that felt distant and muffled. Elara accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and pretended to be interested in Claire's observations about the decor. But her attention kept drifting back to Marcus and Vivian, watching them move through the crowd like they owned everyone in it. Then the music stopped. Marcus stepped onto the small stage at the front of the room, microphone in hand. Vivian stood below him, her platinum blonde hair catching the light like a beacon. She looked radiant, confident. Everything Elara had been told she wasn't. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Marcus began, his voice smooth and practiced. "We're here to celebrate someone very special. Vivian Cross has been an incredible part of my life this past year, and I can't imagine my future without her." Elara's champagne glass trembled slightly in her hand. Claire moved closer, a silent show of support. "Vivian," Marcus continued, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket, "you've shown me what it means to be with someone who matches my ambition. my drive, my vision for the future. Someone strong enough to stand beside me. The words landed like carefully aimed arrows. Strong enough. Everything he told Elara she wasn't. He opened the box, revealing a ring that probably cost more than her clinic's entire equipment budget. "Will you marry me?" The room erupted in applause as Vivian said yes, as Marcus slid the ring onto her finger as they kissed for their audience. Elara stood frozen, the champagne taste turning bitter in her mouth. "He brought me here for this," she realized. "He wanted me to see this. We're leaving," Claire said firmly, taking the glass from Elara's hand and setting it on a nearby table. "Right now." Elara nodded, grateful for her friend's decisiveness when her own thoughts felt scattered and sharp. They turned toward the exit, pushing through the crowd of congratulating guests. Then the doors opened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every shifter present went absolutely still, their instincts recognizing something that demanded submission before their conscious minds could catch up. 3 men entered. The 2 flanking the one in the center were clearly guards, their postures alert and dangerous despite their formal suits. But it was the man in the middle who commanded every bit of attention in the room. He was tall, easily 6'3", with black hair cut short and precise. His suit was simple, dark, expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself, but it was his presence that made Elara's breath catch. Power radiated from him like heat, an authority so absolute that it felt like physical pressure against her skin. Alpha King. The words formed in her mind automatically. Kieran Ashford. She had never seen him before, but there was no mistaking what he was. The ultimate authority in their world. The one who commanded all other alphas. What is he doing here? The Alpha King's eyes swept the room with cold assessment. The celebration had become a frozen tableau, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Even the humans seemed to sense something was wrong, their conversations trailing off into confused silence. Then his gaze found Marcus and Vivian on the stage. He walked forward, his guards remaining by the door. The crowd parted for him automatically, people pressing back to give him space without conscious thought. He stopped in front of the stage. Marcus had gone pale, the microphone hanging forgotten in his hand. Vivian looked between the Alpha King and her new fiancé with growing confusion. "Interesting celebration," Kieran Ashford said. His voice was deep, controlled, each word perfectly clear without needing to be loud. "I apologize for the interruption, but there seems to be a problem with this engagement." Marcus found his voice, though it shook slightly. "I don't understand." "Your Majesty, this is a private event." "Private." The Alpha King's expression didn't change, but something in his tone made several people take another step back. "Yes, I can see that. Unfortunately, private doesn't mean correct. You see, there's an issue with your proposal." He turned then, his dark blue eyes scanning the room until they locked onto Elara. She felt the weight of that gaze like a physical touch, pinning her in place. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "The issue," Kieran continued, still looking directly at her, "is that the person who interests me isn't on that stage. And this particular groom definitely shouldn't be making proposals to anyone." The room seemed to tilt. Elara couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't understand what was happening. Claire grabbed her arm, whispering something urgent that Elara couldn't process through the roaring in her ears. The Alpha King walked toward her. People scrambled out of his path, pressing against walls and tables to avoid being in his way. He stopped 3 feet from where Elara stood frozen and extended his hand. "I believe we have things to discuss," he said quietly. His words meant only for her, despite the room full of witnesses. "Will you come with me?" It wasn't really a question. Not from him. Not with everyone watching. But somehow, impossibly, it sounded like he would accept if she refused. Elara stared at the extended hand. Every instinct she possessed screamed conflicting commands. Run. Submit. Stay perfectly still. The Alpha King's presence was overwhelming, a weight that made her knees want to buckle even as her spine tried to straighten in defiance. "No." The word came out quieter than she intended, but it was still a refusal. Around them, she heard several sharp intakes of breath. Nobody said no to the Alpha King. Kieran Ashford's expression shifted, something almost like approval flickering across his features before settling back into neutrality. "No, I don't know you." Elara forced herself to meet his eyes, even though it felt like staring into deep water. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I won't be used as a piece in some political maneuver between alphas." Behind her, Claire whispered urgently, "Elara, what are you doing?" "You think this is political," Kieran said, not quite a question. He lowered his hand but didn't step back. "Interesting assumption. What else would it be?" Elara's voice grew stronger, anger pushing through the fear. "You show up at a party you clearly weren't invited to, make cryptic statements about engagements, and single me out in front of everyone. That's not interest. That's strategy." "She has a point," someone muttered from the crowd. Elara didn't look to see who. The Alpha King studied her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. It was small, barely there, but genuine. "You're right. It is strategy. But perhaps not the kind you imagine." He turned to address the room, his voice carrying easily to every corner. "Marcus Denton, step down from that stage." It wasn't a request. Marcus moved automatically, his body responding to the command before his mind could protest. He descended the stairs with jerky movements, stopping several feet away like he was afraid to get closer. "Your Majesty." The older man, who must be Vivian's father, stepped forward, his alpha authority impressive by normal standards, but completely overshadowed here. "I'm Alpha Richard Cross of the Riverside Pack. Perhaps we could discuss whatever concerns you have in a more private setting." "Private." Kieran's tone suggested he found the word amusing. "That's the second time someone has suggested privacy tonight. But I think these particular concerns need witnesses. Marcus Denton has been negotiating with the Northern Pack. Specifically, he's been offering to trade information about territories under my protection in exchange for an elevated position in their hierarchy." The room erupted. Voices overlapped, questions and denials and accusations flying. Marcus's face went from pale to red. "That's not true. I would never—" "You would." Kieran cut him off without raising his voice. The authority behind the words made everyone else fall silent. "You have. For the past 6 months, you've been sending detailed reports about patrol routes, safe houses, and vulnerable members of packs in my territory. Lies." But Marcus's voice shook. Kieran turned his attention to Vivian, who stood frozen on the stage. "And you, Miss Cross. Your father's pack has some interesting business arrangements. Contracts with human hunting parties, providing them with information about shifter locations in exchange for a percentage of their profits." Alpha Cross surged forward. "How dare you accuse—" "I dare because it's true." Kieran pulled his phone from his pocket, the movement casual but commanding absolute attention. "I have evidence, contracts, financial records, photographs. Would you like me to share them with everyone here? Or would you prefer to discuss this more privately after all?" "Show us," Elara said. The words surprised her as much as anyone else. All eyes turned to her. "If you're going to make accusations that justify crashing a party and singling me out, prove it." Kieran looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. He held out his phone. "Come see for yourself." Elara stepped forward before she could second-guess the decision. Claire tried to grab her arm, but she shook her head slightly. "Wait here, please." She crossed the distance between them and took the offered phone. The screen showed a scanned document, a contract with Marcus's signature at the bottom. She scrolled, seeing page after page of detailed information about territory boundaries, pack structures, individual shifters' strengths and weaknesses. Her hands started shaking. She had lived with Marcus for 3 years. She knew his handwriting. This was real. "Next folder," Kieran said quietly, standing close enough that his words were for her alone. The photos. She navigated to the image gallery and felt her stomach drop. Vivian, clearly recognizable despite the attempt at casual clothing, sitting across from 2 men in hunting gear. A restaurant, public enough to seem innocent. But the paperwork spread on the table between them told a different story. "The men in that photo," Kieran continued in that same quiet tone, "are known hunters. They specialize in tracking shifters. 3 members of your old pack disappeared last year. They were found dead in a ravine, killed with silver bullets. These are the men responsible. Elara looked up sharply. Hollow Creek? You're saying they killed members of Hollow Creek? 2 of them. Daniel Price and Sarah Winters. The third was from a pack in the Western Territory. Daniel. She had known him since childhood. They used to race through the woods on full moon nights, seeing who could run faster. Sarah had taught her how to track prey by scent alone. Both gone. Both murdered by humans who shouldn't have even known where to find them. Marcus knew. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. He knew, and never told me. He knew, Kieran confirmed. He provided some of the information that helped the hunters locate them. Rage exploded through her, hot and sudden and overwhelming. She spun to face Marcus, who stood frozen with guilt written across every feature. You knew? Daniel and Sarah were my friends. They were good people. They never hurt anyone. And you helped murder them? I didn't know what they were going to do with the information. Marcus's protest sounded desperate. They told me it was for tracking migration patterns, for research. You're a beta, Elara shouted. You can smell a lie from across a room. Don't you dare pretend you didn't know exactly what you were doing. Claire pushed through the crowd to Elara's side, looking bewildered but loyal. What's happening? Who are Daniel and Sarah? Dead, Elara said flatly. They're dead because my ex-boyfriend sold them out to hunters. Vivian's voice cut across the room, sharp and defensive. This is ridiculous. Marcus would never do something like that. And I certainly haven't been meeting with hunters. That could be anyone in those photos. It's you, Alpha Cross said quietly. His face had gone gray. I recognize the necklace, the one your mother gave you. Vivian's hand flew to her throat, touching the pendant there. For a moment she looked panicked, then the expression hardened into something ugly. So what if it is? Do you know how much money there is in that business? Real money, not the scraps we make pretending to be human. You're confessing? Someone in the crowd sounded shocked. I'm stating facts. Vivian turned her glare on Elara. And you pathetic Omega. You can't even let him go, can you? You had to come here, had to see him happy, had to ruin everything because you're too weak to move on. The words stung because part of them felt true. But before Elara could respond, Kieran moved. He stepped between them, his presence suddenly dangerous in a way it hadn't been before. Choose your next words carefully, Miss Cross. Why? Vivian laughed, the sound brittle. What are you going to do? You're not actually interested in her. This is just politics. You're using her to undermine my father's pack. I'm interested, Kieran said, his voice dropping to something almost deadly, in dismantling a network of traitors and murderers. But you're wrong about my interest in Elara Hayes. That's entirely separate from business. He turned to face Elara directly, ignoring everyone else in the room. I have a proposal. A business arrangement, nothing more. Come with me. Pretend to be my companion for 3 months. Help me gather evidence and dismantle the operations your ex-boyfriend and his associates have built. In exchange, I'll guarantee your protection and ensure everyone involved faces consequences. Why me? Elara demanded. Why not use someone from your own people? Because you have something they don't. You were close to Marcus. You knew Hollow Creek. You understand how information flows through small packs. And because every instinct I have says you won't be corrupted by power or intimidated by threats. He paused. Also, you're one of the only people I've met who had the spine to tell me no. Elara looked at Claire, who stood beside her looking completely lost. Her best friend didn't understand half of what was happening, but she was here anyway. Loyal. Constant. I have conditions, Elara said slowly. Name them. This is business only. No expectations beyond the investigation. After 3 months, I walk away free and clear, regardless of whether you've finished whatever you're actually planning. Agreed. And you protect everyone at Hollow Creek. Whatever information Marcus gave out, you make sure those people are safe. Something softened in Kieran's expression. Already being handled. I had teams moving into position before I arrived here tonight. Then yes. Elara lifted her chin. I'll help you. Elara, no. Marcus moved forward, reaching for her. 2 of Kieran's guards appeared from nowhere, blocking his path. You don't know what you're agreeing to. He's using you. Like you used me? Elara's voice was cold. Like you used Daniel and Sarah? At least he's honest about it being business. She turned to Claire, lowering her voice. I'm sorry. I know this makes no sense. Can you go home? I'll explain everything later, I promise. Claire looked between Elara and the imposing Alpha King. Are you safe? Yes. And strangely, Elara meant it. Whatever Kieran Ashford wanted, she didn't think it included hurting her. Okay. Claire squeezed her hand. Call me, tonight. I will. Kieran's guard stepped forward, professional and courteous. Miss Morgan? We'll take you home. Miss Hayes has had a family emergency that requires immediate attention. Claire shot Elara one more worried look before allowing herself to be escorted toward the exit. The crowd parted for them automatically. Elara turned back to find Marcus being restrained by pack members, Alpha Cross arguing with other shifters about jurisdiction, and Vivian standing alone on the stage looking furious and afraid. Ready? Kieran asked. No, Elara admitted. But let's go anyway. The mansion sat 30 minutes outside the city, surrounded by woods thick enough to feel private without being isolated. Elara watched it appear through the car window as Kieran's driver navigated the long driveway. Stone and glass. Modern, but somehow timeless. Lights glowed warm in several windows despite the late hour. How many people live here? She asked. Depends on the day. Kieran sat beside her, his posture relaxed but his attention sharp. There's permanent security staff, rotating teams of investigators and occasional guests who need protection. Right now, about 15. Cozy. He smiled slightly. You'll have your own wing. Privacy when you want it. But I need you accessible for briefings. The car stopped at the front entrance. A woman in her 40s waited by the door, her expression professional but not unfriendly. Miss Hayes, I'm Grace. I manage the household. Your rooms are ready, and I've taken the liberty of arranging some basic necessities. We can shop for anything else you need tomorrow. Thank you. Elara followed her inside, aware of Kieran trailing behind. The interior matched the exterior. Clean lines, comfortable furniture. Nothing ostentatious, but everything quality. Grace led her upstairs and down a hallway to a suite that was larger than her entire apartment above the clinic. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting area with a desk. Windows overlooking the woods. I'll leave you to settle in, Grace said. Kitchen is always open if you're hungry. Just follow the stairs down and turn left. After she left, Elara stood in the middle of the bedroom and tried to process the past 3 hours. This morning she'd been in her clinic, treating a dog with an ear infection. Now she was in the Alpha King's mansion, having agreed to pretend to be his companion while helping investigate murder and treason. Her phone buzzed. Claire, the third call since Elara had been escorted out of the party. She couldn't avoid this any longer. I'm okay, Elara said immediately upon answering. I know that was insane. I'm safe. Where are you? Claire demanded. What the hell happened? Who was that man? And why did everyone act like he was royalty? It's complicated. Elara sat on the edge of the bed. You know that veterinary conference I mentioned possibly attending next month? The one you weren't sure about? They offered me a special project instead. Working with an exotic animal specialist on some research. It's a huge opportunity, but it means I'll be mostly unavailable for the next few months. The lies felt heavy on her tongue. But what else could she say? Claire didn't know about shifters. Couldn't know. And that required leaving a party like your hair was on fire. The specialist was only available tonight for initial meetings. I know it looked weird. I'm sorry I dragged you there and then abandoned you. Claire was quiet for a moment. Elara, is Marcus involved in something dangerous? Yes. At least that was true. But it doesn't involve me anymore. I'm completely separate from whatever he's doing. The man from the party, the one everyone was afraid of. Is he protecting you? Yes. Okay. Claire's voice softened. Okay. I trust you. But if you need help, if you're in trouble, you call me immediately. I don't care what time it is or what's happening. I will. I promise. They talked for a few more minutes, Claire filling her in on how the party had dissolved into chaos after Elara left. Then they said goodbye. And Elara sat holding her phone, feeling the weight of the secret she could never fully share with her best friend. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Kieran stood in the hallway, changed from his formal suit into dark jeans and a fitted shirt. He looked more human this way, though the power still radiated from him. Briefing in 20 minutes if you're up for it. War room is 2 doors down on the right. War room? What else would you call it? He shrugged. Get some rest if you prefer. We can start fresh tomorrow. No. I'm awake. I'll be there. The war room justified its name. One wall was covered in maps, marked with pins and notes. Another held photographs, strings connecting various images and patterns Elara couldn't immediately decipher. A large table dominated the center, covered in files and laptops. 3 people were already there when Elara entered. Kieran introduced them quickly. Thomas handles security coordination. Nina runs intelligence gathering. Marcus manages logistics. And yes, we're all very aware of the unfortunate name coincidence. Marcus, not her ex, was in his 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. He smiled apologetically. My mother liked the name. I've been trying to get people to call me Mark for years, but it never sticks. Information comes from multiple sources, Nina explained, pulling up files on the laptop in front of her. PACs report suspicious activity. We monitor financial transactions. We track movement patterns of known hunters. She looked at Elara. Kieran says you have veterinary training? I run a clinic. Elara moved closer to examine the maps. Small animal mostly, but I've treated wolves, wild and otherwise. Can you identify individual animals by their physical characteristics? Tracks, scat, territorial markers? Usually, yes. Why? Nina pulled up a new map, this one showing a section of forest marked with dates and symbols. We've been tracking hunter activity by finding their kill sites, but we're missing something. The pattern doesn't make complete sense. They seem to know where shifters will be before the shifters themselves know. Elara studied the map, her professional training kicking in. The markers showed locations spread across several miles, but there was something familiar about the distribution. These dates. What phase was the moon? Does that matter? For shifters, yes. Full moon makes the transformation easier, more instinctive. Most packs run together then. New moon is harder, requires more control. She traced a line between several points. These kills all happened 3 days after full moon. That's when younger shifters are still feeling confident but starting to get careless. And these locations form a corridor between 2 water sources. Migration route, Kieran said, moving to stand beside her. They're predicting movement based on environmental factors. Not just predicting. Elara pointed to 3 clusters. Look at the spacing. These are ambush points. The hunters are hurting them, creating noise or scent markers here and here, pushing the shifters toward these killing zones. The room went quiet. Nina typed rapidly on her laptop, pulling up additional data. If you're right, there should be reports of unusual disturbances in these areas on the days leading up to the kills. There are, Thomas said, checking his own files. We have them marked as unrelated incidents. Construction noise, controlled burns, hunting parties. Separately, they mean nothing. Together, they're a hunting strategy. Elara felt sick. This wasn't opportunistic killing. It was systematic, planned. You need to check all the Forest Service records. Anywhere permits were issued for controlled burns, construction, anything that would create disturbance in these territories. Kieran was already on his phone. Send teams to investigate every site Elara marked. Cross-reference with permit records going back 2 years. I want names attached to every authorization. They worked through the night. Elara's understanding of animal behavior combining with Nina's intelligence data to reveal patterns no one had seen before. By dawn, they had identified 7 additional probable ambush sites, and 3 people who kept appearing in permit authorization chains. Get some sleep, Kieran finally ordered, when Elara's eyes started drifting closed over a map. This is good work. Better than good. She made it back to her room and collapsed on the bed without bothering to change clothes. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Elara spent mornings on video calls managing her clinic remotely, grateful she'd hired an assistant last year who could handle day-to-day operations. Afternoons were briefings and analysis. Evenings were often spent at her desk, reviewing files until her vision blurred. Marcus called constantly at first. His messages alternated between apologetic and angry, sometimes within the same voicemail. I still love you. I made mistakes. Please talk to me. You're making a huge error trusting him. He's using you. Call me back. I can explain everything. You're going to regret this." She blocked his number after the 20th message. The tension between her and Kieran remained carefully professional. He was respectful of her space, never pushing beyond the boundaries she set. But sometimes she'd catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Interest, definitely, but something else too. Something that made her skin feel warm and her thoughts scatter. She refused to examine those reactions too closely. The social event was mandatory, Kieran informed her one morning. Regional alphas gather monthly. It's political theater mostly, but necessary. They need to see you with me. Solidify the impression that you're under my protection. Wonderful. Elara had been dreading this. She could handle maps and strategy. She wasn't sure she could handle a room full of dominant predators assessing her worth. Grace helped her dress, providing a deep green gown that somehow managed to be elegant without being revealing. "You'll be fine," she assured Elara. "Just remember, half of them are terrified of Kieran, and the other half are trying very hard to pretend they're not." The gathering took place in a hotel ballroom downtown, decorated in the kind of neutral luxury that screamed corporate event. Alphas from a dozen territories filled the space, each surrounded by their own small entourage. The dominance displays were subtle but constant. Posture, positioning, tone of voice. Every interaction was a negotiation of status. Elara stayed close to Kieran, acutely aware of being evaluated by everyone in the room. She was an Omega at an Alpha gathering, weak by their standards, unworthy of the Alpha King's attention. "Kieran." A woman approached, tall and striking with auburn hair and amber eyes that marked her as shifter even in human form. "I didn't expect to see you here. Usually you send a representative to these tedious affairs." Isla. Kieran's tone was polite, but not warm. "Circumstances change. Elara Hayes, this is Isla Brennan. She runs the coastal pack." Isla's gaze swept over Elara with thinly veiled disdain. "How nice. Another Omega seeking the King's protection. Tell me, dear, what makes you special? There are dozens just like you." The surrounding conversations quieted slightly. People were listening without appearing to. Elara could have responded with anger, could have let the insult cut the way it was intended to. Instead, she smiled politely. "I'm not sure what makes anyone special, though I imagine having a stable pack helps. It must be difficult maintaining authority when members keep having unfortunate accidents." Isla's expression froze. "Excuse me? I heard you lost 3 pack members last year. Terrible tragedy. So young, weren't they? And all in separate incidents. A car accident. A drowning. A fall from a hiking trail." Elara kept her tone sympathetic, concerned. "Such a strange pattern of misfortune. I'm sure you've investigated thoroughly to ensure there's no underlying cause. Safety should always be the priority." The implication hung in the air. 3 deaths in 1 year, all appearing accidental, could indicate a threat the Alpha failed to identify and protect against. Or it could indicate an Alpha weak enough that pack members were being picked off systematically. Either way, it suggested incompetence. Isla's face went red, then pale. "Those were thoroughly investigated." "I'm sure they were." Elara's voice remained gentle, making the words even more cutting. "Still, if you'd like a second opinion, Kieran has excellent investigators on staff. It would be terrible if there really was a threat you'd missed." Isla turned on her heel and walked away without another word. The conversations around them resumed, but Elara caught several surprised glances directed her way. Kieran waited until they were alone by the windows before speaking. "That was remarkable. That was mean," Elara corrected. "She was cruel first. But I didn't have to retaliate. You defended yourself without physical aggression or losing control. Most alphas in this room couldn't manage that." He studied her face. "Where did you learn to fight with words instead of claws?" "Veterinary school. You'd be surprised how many clients try to intimidate their way out of paying bills." She smiled slightly. "Also, being an Omega means you learn early that direct confrontation usually loses. Better to make people question themselves." "I've been watching you," Kieran said quietly. "That probably sounds invasive, but I've been aware of you for months. Since last spring, when a wolf showed up at your clinic in the middle of the night with a broken leg and silver poisoning. You treated him without asking questions. Kept him overnight. Never reported it. He was one of mine. Elara remembered. The wolf had been young, terrified, in agonizing pain from silver fragments embedded in the break. She'd sedated him, removed the silver, set the bone. When he'd transformed back to human in the morning, she'd given him clothes and money for a cab. He needed help, she said simply. You could have called authorities, could have reported a dangerous animal, could have demanded payment you knew he couldn't provide. Kieran turned to face her fully. Instead, you helped him, asked nothing in return, and never told anyone. That's when I started paying attention. That's when I realized you were stronger than everyone who'd ever called you weak. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. This wasn't politics. This wasn't strategy. This was something real and dangerous, and entirely too tempting. Don't, Elara said quietly. Don't make this complicated. We have an agreement. 3 months. Business only. You're right. He stepped back, the professional mask sliding back into place. We should return to the event. But the tension between them had shifted into something neither of them could ignore any longer. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the permit officials Nina had been tracking tried to run. Thomas's team intercepted him at the airport with a one-way ticket to out of the country and enough cash to disappear permanently. After 6 hours of interrogation, he gave them an address. A warehouse on the industrial edge of the city, rented under a shell company that traced back to the same financial network Vivian's father had been using. We go tonight, Kieran decided, studying the satellite images Nina had pulled up. Small team. Thomas, his 2 best, Elara, and me. I should stay here, Elara protested. I'm not trained for this kind of thing. You can identify shifter evidence better than anyone on my team. If there are records, I need you to interpret them. He looked at her directly. I won't put you in unnecessary danger, but I need your expertise. They left at midnight, 2 vehicles driving through empty streets toward the warehouse district. Elara wore dark clothes Grace had provided, practical and flexible. A vest that Thomas promised would stop most bullets, though the weight of it made everything feel more real and more frightening. The warehouse was dark, surrounded by a fence that Thomas's team cut through with efficient silence. No guards visible, no signs of activity. Either they'd been wrong about this location, or the hunters felt secure enough not to post obvious security. Thomas went first, checking for alarms and traps. He signaled all clear, and they entered through a side door that opened with a lockpick and 30 seconds of careful work. Inside, the warehouse was divided into sections. Equipment storage along one wall, guns and ammunition arranged with military precision. A small office area in the corner. And in the center, filing cabinets and boxes stacked 6 feet high. Split up, Kieran ordered quietly. Thomas, secure the perimeter. Elara, start on those files. Look for anything referencing specific shifters or locations. She moved to the filing cabinets, pulling open drawers and scanning the contents with her phone's flashlight. Supply orders, financial records, correspondence about equipment. Then she found a drawer labeled simply, Targets. Her hands shook as she pulled out the first file. Photographs of shifters, some in human form, some as wolves. Names, ages, pack affiliations, physical descriptions and behavioral patterns. Each file ended with a date and a location marked, completed. Kieran? She called softly. He was beside her immediately. She handed him the files, unable to speak past the horror closing her throat. He flipped through them, his expression growing darker with each page. These are kill records. They're documenting every shifter they've murdered. Elara forced herself to keep searching. More files, more photographs, more lives reduced to targets and completion dates. Then she saw a familiar face and her heart stopped. Daniel Price. His file included photos from what must have been surveillance. Daniel leaving work, Daniel at a coffee shop, Daniel running through the woods in wolf form. The completion date was 9 months ago. The location matched where his body had been found. The next file was Sarah Winters. Same detailed surveillance, same clinical documentation, same terrible ending. I knew them, Elara whispered. Daniel and I grew up together. Sarah taught me to track. They were good people. They never hurt anyone. Kieran's hand settled on her shoulder, steady and warm. I'm sorry. Marcus knew. The rage was building now, burning away the shock. He gave them the information that made this possible. He helped murder my friends. We'll make sure everyone responsible faces consequences, Kieran promised. Keep looking. We need to document everything. She pulled out her phone and started photographing files, creating evidence that couldn't be disputed. More names, more faces, more lives ended. 23 files total. 23 shifters killed over the past 2 years. A sound from outside froze everyone in place. Engines. Multiple vehicles approaching fast. Ambush, Thomas said, his voice tight. They knew we were coming. Thomas yanked the intercepted official's phone from his pocket and checked the screen. A call had been placed minutes earlier from a blocked number, then wiped clean. Too late to hide the tower ping. He warned them, Thomas said. He got a message out before we grabbed him. Out, now. Kieran grabbed Elara's arm, pulling her toward the door they'd entered through. Thomas and his team moved to cover their exit, weapons drawn. They made it halfway to the door before the warehouse lights flooded on, blindingly bright. Armed men poured through entrances on all sides, at least a dozen of them. Hunters, Elara realized. They'd walked directly into a trap. Alpha King, one of them called out, middle-aged with military bearing. You're far from your territory, and you brought such interesting company. Kieran positioned himself in front of Elara, his body a shield. You're on my territory. Every inch of this city falls under my jurisdiction. Jurisdiction. The man laughed. Fancy word for an animal trying to pretend he's civilized. Put down the weapons, all of you. Thomas and his team didn't move. The tension stretched, everyone waiting to see who would break first. Then Elara saw it, a tiny red dot appearing on Kieran's back, tracking upward toward his head. Sniper, positioned somewhere in the rafters with a clear line of sight. She didn't think. Didn't calculate odds or consequences. She just moved, throwing herself against Kieran's side and knocking them both sideways. The shot cracked through the air, missing by inches and sparking off the metal door behind where they'd been standing. They hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through Elara's shoulder where something had caught her, burning and sharp. She'd been grazed, she realized distantly. The bullet had clipped her on its way past. Then Kieran was moving, and Elara understood why everyone was afraid of the Alpha King. He transformed mid-motion, clothes tearing as his body shifted into something between human and wolf, larger than any natural animal. Black fur and muscle and fury given physical form. The hunters opened fire, but Kieran was already among them. He moved with terrifying speed and precision, taking down armed men like they were nothing. Not killing, she noticed. Disabling. Breaking bones and rendering weapons useless, but leaving them alive to face justice. Thomas and his team engaged the others, the warehouse erupting into controlled chaos. Elara pressed herself against a filing cabinet, clutching her bleeding shoulder and trying to stay out of the way. More shots from the rafters. The sniper still had position. Elara grabbed a heavy stapler from a nearby desk and hurled it as hard as she could at the overhead lights. The bulbs shattered, plunging sections of the warehouse into darkness and eliminating the sniper's clear advantage. 5 minutes later, it was over. The hunters were on the ground, subdued or unconscious. Kieran stood in the center of the warehouse in human form again, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles that wasn't his own. His clothes were destroyed, but someone handed him a jacket that he pulled on before moving to Elara. You're hurt. His hands were gentle, examining her shoulder with careful precision. The graze had bled significantly but wasn't deep. I'm okay. You were about to be shot. You saved my life. Something in his voice made her look up at him. His eyes were still more wolf than human, intense and focused entirely on her. Yes, well, I have excellent reflexes. They gathered the evidence, Thomas calling for backup and medical teams. The hunters were restrained, the files boxed for transport. Elara sat on the hood of their vehicle while Thomas's medic cleaned and bandaged her shoulder properly. The drive back to the mansion was quiet. Kieran sat beside her, closer than necessary, his presence a constant awareness against her side. Every time the car turned or hit a bump and she winced, his hand would hover near her arm as if he wanted to steady her, but wasn't sure if touch was welcome. At the mansion, Grace took one look at them and immediately prepared the medical room. The medic had done good field work, but proper cleaning and stitches were necessary. Kieran dismissed everyone else, closing the door and pulling supplies from cabinets with practiced ease. "You don't have to do this," Elara said. "I'm sure there are people better qualified." "I'm qualified." He soaked gauze in antiseptic. "This is going to sting." It did, but she bit back the reaction. He worked with steady hands, cleaning the wound thoroughly before applying fresh bandages. His fingers were warm against her skin, careful not to hurt her more than necessary. "The 3-month agreement," Kieran said quietly, not looking up from his work. "It was an excuse." "What?" "I saw you that night with the injured shifter, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. You were everything I'd been taught Omegas weren't supposed to be. Strong, independent, brave in ways that had nothing to do with physical dominance." He finished securing the bandage and finally met her eyes. "I wanted a reason to approach you that didn't make me seem like every other alpha who tries to claim something they want through force or intimidation. So, when the investigation pointed to Marcus, when I saw the opportunity to offer you something that benefited us both, I took it." "You could have just asked me to dinner," Elara said, though her heart was racing. "Could I have? You were building a life separate from pack politics, from alphas who thought they had the right to judge your worth. Why would you have trusted me?" He had a point. If Kieran Ashford had simply shown up at her clinic and asked her out, she would have assumed it was a power play. Another dominant male trying to control her. "I'm fighting feelings I shouldn't have," Elara admitted. "This was supposed to be simple. 3 months of pretending, then I go back to my normal life. Except nothing feels simple anymore." Kieran reached up, his hand cupping her uninjured cheek with surprising gentleness. "Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me to maintain the professional boundaries, and I'll respect that. But if there's any chance you feel even a fraction of what I do, I need to know. She should stop this. Should maintain the distance that kept things safe and uncomplicated." Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him. He responded immediately, his hand sliding into her hair as he deepened the kiss. There was heat and want, and something deeper that Elara didn't have words for. She felt it in the way he held her, careful of her injury but possessive in a way that should have bothered her, but somehow didn't. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Elara pressed her hand against his chest. "Wait. Stop." He froze immediately. "Did I hurt you?" "No. But I can't do this. Not yet." She struggled to organize her thoughts. Marcus is still out there. Vivian and her father are still threats. My past is incomplete and messy, and I won't start something real with you until I've finished dealing with it. I won't be someone's mate while I'm still tangled up in someone else's betrayal." Kieran nodded slowly. "I understand. When you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be here." His phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression darkened. "Marcus knows about tonight. The warehouse, the evidence, all of it. He's just submitted a formal challenge under old shifter law. He's claiming right to contest for you. He can't do that. I'm not property to be contested over. The law predates modern pack structures. It's archaic, and I've been trying to get it abolished for years. But it's still technically valid." Kieran's jaw tightened. "If I refuse, he can claim I'm not honoring the old ways. It undermines my authority as king. So you have to accept." "Yes. But Elara, I need you to understand something. When this is over, when I've dealt with Marcus and the hunters and everything else, you're free. The 3 months, this arrangement, none of it obligates you to anything. If you want to walk away, you walk away." She looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, and felt something settle in her chest. "Let's deal with Marcus first. Then we'll figure out the rest." The challenge grounds were chosen by neutral parties. A clearing in the forest, far from human eyes, surrounded by trees that had witnessed shifter disputes for generations. 3 regional alphas arrived to serve as witnesses, their presence lending legitimacy to proceedings that felt barbaric to Elara. She stood beside Kieran at the edge of the clearing, watching Marcus arrive with what remained of his support. He'd lost weight in the 3 weeks since the warehouse, his face gaunt, and his eyes carrying desperation that made him look unfamiliar. Alpha Richard Cross was notably absent. He had been confined under Kieran's authority pending council review, his movements restricted and watched. Vivian stood at a distance, her platinum hair dull in the overcast light, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. The engagement ring was gone from her finger. "This is archaic," one of the witness alphas muttered. Alpha Morrison, elderly and scarred from decades of leadership. "We should have abolished this practice years ago." "Agreed," Kieran said quietly. "But the law stands until we formally change it. And I won't undermine the structure that keeps our people safe, just because I find one aspect distasteful." Marcus stepped forward, addressing the witnesses with forced confidence. "I invoke the right of challenge under the old laws. Kieran Ashford has claimed interest in Elara Hayes. I dispute that claim based on prior relationship and my right to contest for her regard." "This isn't about regard," Elara said, her voice cutting across the clearing. "This is about ownership. You're treating me like property that can be won or lost through violence. The old laws," Marcus began. "The old laws are wrong." She walked into the center of the circle, forcing everyone to look at her. "But if we're going to honor them, then honor all of them. The challenged has the right to speak before combat begins. I'm invoking that right." The witness alphas looked at each other. Alpha Morrison nodded slowly. "She's correct. The old texts specify that anyone directly affected by the challenge outcome may address the circle before first blood." "Fine." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Say what you need to say." Elara turned to face him fully, letting 3 years of buried pain and rage rise to the surface. "You told me I wasn't strong enough, that I would never be worthy of standing beside someone important. You made me believe my value as a person was determined by my rank as a shifter. Elara, I'm not finished." Her voice didn't rise, but the authority in it silenced him. "You left me feeling broken and worthless. I spent months questioning everything about myself, wondering if I was really as weak and pathetic as you claimed." She pulled papers from her jacket, the evidence they'd gathered from the warehouse. "Then I learned the truth. You weren't protecting me from my weakness. You were hiding your own corruption. You sold information about pack territories to hunters. You helped them track and kill innocent shifters. Daniel Price and Sarah Winters, members of my old pack, died because of intelligence you provided." Marcus's face went white. "I never meant for anyone to die. They promised it was just surveillance. You knew exactly what you were doing," Elara said, her voice carrying through the clearing. "You knew enough to keep taking the money. You knew enough to keep me in the dark. You can smell a lie from 50 feet away. Don't you dare stand there and pretend you didn't know exactly what those hunters would do with the information you gave them." She held up the documents for the witness alphas to see. Financial records showing payments from hunting organizations to Marcus Denton over 18 months. Emails discussing specific shifter locations and behavioral patterns. Copies of contracts with his signature authorizing information transfers. Alpha Morrison took the papers, scanning them with growing disgust. The other witnesses moved closer, examining the evidence. "You killed them," Elara continued, her voice breaking slightly. "Daniel was my friend since childhood. Sarah taught me everything I know about tracking. They were good people who never hurt anyone, and you helped murderers find them. It wasn't like that." Marcus's desperation was palpable. "I needed the money. The Riverside Pack demands contributions based on status, and I couldn't keep up the payments without additional income. It was supposed to be harmless information, just territorial boundaries, population estimates, 23 bodies," Kieran said coldly. "We found files documenting 23 shifters killed over 2 years, all tracked using information that traces back to you or Vivian's father's organization." The witness alphas moved away from Marcus like he carried disease. Alpha Morrison's expression had gone from neutral to revolted. "You betrayed your own kind for money?" "I was trying to survive." Marcus's control was cracking. "The pack demands were impossible. Vivian's father promised me a position in his organization if I proved useful. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement. Temporary." Another witness alpha, younger but carrying herself with rigid dignity, stepped forward. "My cousin disappeared last year. Nathaniel Brooks. We found his body 3 months later with silver bullets in his chest. Was he one of your temporary arrangements? Marcus said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Vivian moved then, stepping into the circle with her chin raised. He's telling the truth about one thing. My father created the arrangement with the hunters. Marcus was just a convenient source of information. But my father wasn't the only Alpha involved. The clearing went deadly silent. Alpha Cross established contracts with 3 different hunting organizations. Vivian continued, her voice flat. He wasn't working alone. Alpha Brennan from the Coastal Pack provided similar intelligence about her territory. So did Alpha Torres from the Mountain Pack. They created a network, selling information about vulnerable shifters to humans who pay premium prices for exotic hunts. You're lying, Alpha Morrison said. But his voice held doubt. I have proof. Vivian pulled out her phone, her hands shaking. Bank records, encrypted communications, video of meetings. I documented everything because I knew eventually this would collapse, and I'd need leverage to survive the fallout. She looked at Marcus with something between pity and contempt. You really thought my father would protect you? You were disposable from the start. A useful idiot who could be blamed when the operation inevitably got exposed. Marcus lunged toward her, but Kieran's guards intercepted him effortlessly. He struggled against their hold, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. You knew. You knew everything, and you let me believe we were partners. We were never partners. Vivian turned to the witness alphas. I'll provide all documentation in exchange for immunity. Everything I know about the hunting network, every alpha involved, every transaction recorded, but I want protection and amnesty. Alpha Morrison looked to Kieran. This is your jurisdiction. Your decision. No immunity, Kieran said flatly, but cooperation will be considered during sentencing. You'll face consequences for your involvement, Miss Cross. The severity depends on how useful your information proves. Vivian nodded, accepting the terms. Kieran turned to Alpha Morrison and the other witnesses. Marcus Denton no longer has pack affiliation. Alpha Cross expelled him 2 days ago when the initial evidence became public. He has no authority, no standing, and no right to issue challenges under the old laws. The challenge was issued before expulsion, Marcus protested weakly. The challenge is invalid, Alpha Morrison declared. You cannot contest for someone while you yourself hold no status within our community. The old laws are clear on this point. Those without pack cannot invoke pack rights. Marcus sagged in the guard's grip, all fight draining from him. He looked at Elara with something that might have been genuine regret. I did love you. That part was real. No, Elara said quietly. You loved the idea of me, someone you could control and diminish to make yourself feel powerful. You never actually saw me. Kieran stepped forward, addressing Marcus directly. You're marked as traitor to shifter kind. You'll leave this territory within 24 hours. If you return, if you contact anyone here, if you interfere in any way with our community, the sentence is death. Understood? Marcus nodded mutely. Get him out of here, Kieran ordered his guards. They hauled Marcus away, his departure watched by 36 pairs of eyes that held nothing but contempt. The witnesses dispersed, Alpha Morrison promising to convene a council to address the hunting network and the alphas involved. Vivian was taken into custody by Kieran's security team, her phone and documents seized as evidence. Elara stood in the center of the empty clearing, feeling something release in her chest. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. Marcus's downfall brought no joy, but closure maybe. The chapter finally, definitively finished. You were remarkable, Kieran said, coming to stand beside her. Most people would have wanted blood. Blood doesn't fix anything. It just makes more mess. She looked at him. Is it really over? The immediate threat, yes. There's still work to do. Other alphas to investigate. Hunting networks to dismantle. Survivors who need support. But Marcus is gone. He can't hurt you anymore. The weeks that followed were busy, but felt lighter somehow. Elara split her time between the mansion and her clinic, discovering she could manage both with proper help. Grace connected her with a shifter veterinary network she hadn't known existed, expanding her client base and her resources. She worked with Nina and Thomas on the ongoing investigation, her analytical skills proving valuable in tracking the larger patterns of corruption. 3 more alphas were eventually charged. 12 hunters were arrested. The network was fractured, if not entirely destroyed. Claire appeared at the mansion on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced and determined. Grace tried to redirect her, but Elara heard the commotion and came downstairs. "We need to talk," Claire said, her expression serious. "No more lies, no more excuses about veterinary conferences. I want the truth." Elara looked at Kieran, who had emerged from his office. He nodded slightly, giving permission she technically didn't need. They sat in the garden, privacy secured with posted guards and collected phones. Elara told her everything. About shifters, about Marcus's betrayal, about the hunting network and the investigation, about what she was and what Kieran represented. Claire listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through disbelief, shock, anger, and finally something like understanding. When Elara finished, silence stretched between them. "Show me," Claire finally said. "I need to see it or I'll convince myself this is an elaborate breakdown." Elara transformed, letting her bones shift and reform into wolf shape. It hurt less than it used to, the change smoother with practice. She sat on her haunches, looking up at her best friend with golden wolf eyes. Claire reached out tentatively, touching the fur on Elara's head. "Holy shit, this is real. You're actually—" She laughed, slightly hysterical. "My best friend is a werewolf. That's my life now." Elara shifted back, accepting the robe Kieran had thoughtfully provided. "Are we okay?" "Yeah." Claire wiped her eyes. "Yeah, we're okay. I mean, I'm going to have about 1,000 questions later, but we're okay. You're still you." "I'm still me," Elara agreed, relief flooding through her. More weeks passed. The investigation wound down. Elara's shoulder healed completely. The clinic thrived. She fell into a rhythm that felt sustainable, balance between her professional life and the shifter world she'd rejoined. Kieran proposed on a Thursday evening, in her clinic after hours. No witnesses, no ceremony, just the two of them surrounded by kennels and the soft sounds of recovering animals. "I'm not asking you to be my mate because the investigation is finished, or because some old law says I have claim to you," he said, holding a simple silver ring between them. "I'm asking because you're the strongest person I've ever met. Because you challenge me and ground me and make me want to be better. Because I love you. And I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice in trusting me." Elara took the ring, examining the simple band with its small emerald stone. "No diamonds? Diamonds are what everyone expects. You deserve something unique." She slipped it on her finger. "Yes, I'll marry you. But I'm keeping the clinic, and I'm not moving into the mansion full-time. I need my own space sometimes. I wouldn't ask you to give up anything that matters to you. And I want it official that I'm not just your mate. I'm your partner, equal in all the ways that count, already drafted into the formal agreements." He pulled her close, careful and reverent. "Anything else?" "Just this." She kissed him, and it felt like coming home and launching into something new at the same time. Outside, Claire waited in her car, ready to take Elara to dinner and demand every detail. The clinic's nightlight glowed warm through the windows. Somewhere in the woods beyond the city, shifters ran free under the moon, safer now than they'd been in years. Elara Hayes had been told she wasn't strong enough, wasn't worthy enough, wasn't anything enough. She'd proven them all wrong.